for our back experts. So if you've got any of those, do call in or phone in. Mind matters now. I want to talk about ADHD. There was a fascinating piece in one of the newspapers saying that I've lost over £4,000 because of ADHD tax. What on earth is this? I thought. It's about impulsive spending, which gives you a quick hit of dopamine, and then it's got that lasting impact. Apparently, many people with ADHD also have dyscalculia, so they can't work out how much they are spending. So what this article was really about is a linking some of the overspending ways people have with ADHD, which is an interesting one. Joining me today, I'm delighted to say, is Dr. Khurram Sadiq, who is a psychiatrist and specialises in ADHD. Dr. Khurram, number one, thank you so much for joining me. Let's start at the very beginning. What exactly is ADHD?
Right. There's a neurodevelopmental disorder. It signifies attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It means that people who has this condition has difficulty in keeping attention on task. They're hyperactive, they're impulsive. As a result of that, there are things that they do that can be considered as a disorder, as a pathology, because of which it requires some treatment. And most of the time, it's just condition. It's not a disorder. It becomes a disorder once they get into criminality, or they have got a dual diagnosis or a co-occurring condition, which makes it more complex.
Is there a difference between, or maybe you can explain the difference between ADD and ADHD?
Yeah. Well, ADD is an old term. It's an obsolete term that used to be defined as attentional deficit disorder. That used to be used in DSM-5 before 2013, till it changed to an ADHD with different three subtypes, which was the ADHD, the predominantly inattentive type, in which problem is attention, distractibility, organization, forgetfulness. And then you have hyperactivity and impulsivity, which means that they're hyperactive, they've got too much energy, people find it difficult to keep up with them, they make impulsive decisions. As a result of that, they breach social boundaries, they are not akin to social norms and get into trouble. And then there's a third type, which is a combined type, in which the person has got inattention, hyperactivity, impulsivity, all of it.
So let's go back to probably when I was a kid, back in the old days when it kind of either didn't exist or nobody knew about it. And kids just were seen then as being many of the things you described at school. They were probably disruptive, they couldn't concentrate, but they were probably either punished for it or learned a way to conform, suppress, all of those things.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I think the most common terminologies that we've used, it's still being used in certain schools, because when they're not aware of it and they have not been educated, they get lazy, naughty, disruptive. These are the terminologies that are still being used now, because the workforce that is in schools, they have not been taught about these conditions, or they have been taught about these conditions, but there's so much, they see so much of it, they become desensitized towards it, these conditions. So these terminologies are still being used. However, it used to be used quite proficiently around that time, because nobody cared about ADHD, because at that time ADHD was considered a very Americanized diagnosis, and they used to believe that at 18, it's, however, the symptoms vaporizes and the person becomes devoid of ADHD.
Well, I mean, I used to joke that if I was a kid at school now, I would have been diagnosed with ADHD. Lo and behold, my kids have, and I was told it's genetic. And many of the things that I've come to appreciate about myself, having all of that energy, and what have you, I'm kind of ticked off that it might be seen as something negative. I think, am I right in saying that a lot of people my age, I mean, a lot of people have suffered, but a lot of people my age have incorporated those things into our personalities and kind of made it work for us. I'm not kidding for a moment. There are
Yeah,
downsides, but
yeah, yeah,
we had to learn to manage it.
yeah. I think you're absolutely right. It is because when we go through life, we have experiences. We reflect on experiences. We create our own hacks. We create our own situations. We create our own support structure. They call it
Mm.
the scaffolding that keep us together. And hence, because of that, we do not experience a lot of ADHD people. They develop that scaffolding because they have missed the net when they were child, or at that time the services were not there. So you live with it, but live with it in symbiosis. And then again, you learn to know more about yourself and how privileged and how amazing this condition be, because the kind of energy levels that a person has, you don't have. A non-ADHD won't have it. Or the kind of thought process you have, there are a million thoughts going on. Amongst those million thoughts, 10 or 15 thoughts will be absolutely brilliant. Rest of will be very, very normal. And a few of them will be very very outdated, or it won't make sense. But again, having that abundance of thought gives rise to creativity, because then you're able to think differently about different perspectives, about dealing with things, because you have got so many ideas going around in your head at that time.
It's nice to hear somebody talk about that there might actually be pluses, because I put to you that many parents are being told their child might have ADHD. It's seen as something dreadful, awful. It's going to ruin their life.
No, absolutely. I think there are two parallel models going on. There's a deficit model and there's a neurodiversity paradigm. The neurodiversity paradigm talks about it being helpful, being privileged. It is a condition, they deal with it, but then there are so many privileges that comes with this condition. Whereas the deficit model only, you don't have this, you don't have this, and you don't have this, and hence you suffer. So nowadays, the neurodiversity paradigm, it has become more popular now, which explains a lot of condition, autism, ADHD, as very gifted individuals.
Now let's go to number one, how early can ADHD be identified in a child? I mean, what are the earliest signs one is likely to see? Is it only once they start attending school?
Mm-hmm. I think what we have to understand about these conditions are the transitions. And the transitions are very important. The transitions from home to school, for example, home to nursery to primary to secondary, secondary to sixth form to university. These are the transition in which things become more apparent, because when parents are dealing with this with a kid with ADHD, especially if that's the only kid and they do not have anybody to compare it with, they think that it's norm, and they deal with it accordingly until they go to school and the teachers start identifying it as a child who's quite disruptive, who is unable to sit still. That's where things become more apparent. Now, it can be diagnosed as early as 4 years, but a person cannot be medicated before 5 years of age. Like the optimum, the age limit is to start at 6 o'clock, age 6. But between 5 to 6, if they're disruptive, if they're unable to sit still, if it is having an impact on their life, on the social situation, on the people around them, then they can be medicated as early as 5 years of age. But they can be diagnosed earlier than 5 years. Now, the red flag would be they are unable to sit still. I think what I have noticed in people, because we take a lot of developmental history starting from the milestones. So they start crawling and walking at a young age. You'll see people who will be walking at about 10 months, 9 months, 7 months. And then you will see children who will start proper stringing in sentences when they are a year and 2 months and year and 3 months. So everything is going very swift if it is a pure ADHD. They have got too much energy. They're unable to sit still. They would not stop. They are absolutely relentless. One of the statements that I've heard from others is they started walking at 1 year, and it was not walking. They started running, and they have never stopped. So it's like it's like having a Ferrari engine on a bicycle. It is like that, where it is so difficult to manage them, and these are the red flags. However, the thing about hyperactivity is that with time, with age, it decreases. Whereas the inattentive symptoms, for example, the distractibility, the inattentive features, or disorganization, that becomes more apparent as they go to school, especially between the transitions of primary and secondary, whereas hyperactivity is very, very visible at a very early age. So there's a very good chance that a child who's diagnosed with a combined type of ADHD, who has got hyperactivity, impulsivity, inattention, and you look at the child at about 19 years, you will only see inattentive features because the hyperactivity and the impulsivity has actually tapered down.
Right.
So it is, yeah.
Sorry, I was going to ask, as a final question, is medication the only answer, or is it medication and education, or is it possible to manage it without medication?
Well, a lot of sportsmen, they manage it without sports, because the thing is, what you have to understand is the evolutionary basis of ADHD. Like when you talk about hunters and farmers, this used to be quite a prevalent condition that used to have. It was not a condition, it was ingrained. They were programmed, because if they were not distracted by a rustling of leaves in the forest, the next second, they might be dead. Yeah. And if they were not hyperactive in that situation, they would not be able to run away from those risks and those risky situations. And if they were not impulsive, they had to make the decision there and then, they would be dead. So taking from there, the genes have persisted, and in certain families and in certain tribes and certain culture, you see more often than not. And again, because the world has changed around that, and a few of the genes, most of the genes, they have mutated and they have kind of become suitable to the environment. But there are some resistant genes which have persisted, and hence we see ADHD. Hence, after the pandemic, you have seen an endemic of ADHD. It's because the world has changed. The world has become more stagnant. Human is not designed to sit down behind office desks and do things. And hence, we see a lot of ADHD. And hence, I tell people that if you choose the profession carefully, for example, something that you enjoy the most, if they have got hyperactive, impulsive type, and if you go into things like sports or sporting activities, which you enjoy, you will be able to best deal with the situation without going on the medication. But medication in adults is the first line. In children, it's behavioral techniques, parental training, and medication comes then. I believe that it's a combination of medication and the combination of, let's say, different strategies bring together that helps to recircuit the brain. And eventually one can come off the medication if they have developed their routine, their guidance. And I've seen people coming off the medication and doing brilliantly well. It's not that the ADHD is going to go away, but they're actually able to live in symbiosis with ADHD.
Wow, it's so interesting. You've explained so much. I mean, that's why I'm before I broke my leg, I'm a runner and a skater, and I work out and I do all of this, and people tell me, oh God, you're mad. But I need to do all of that, even at my tender years of 66. It's been absolutely fascinating speaking with you, and I do thank you for your time and your wisdom and sharing your wisdom. Thank you so much. Dr. Khurram Sadiq, as you heard, is an absolute expert specializing in ADHD. Wow, who knew? A little bit later on with our doctor in the house, we're going to be talking about back problems, so keep your